Today is Sunday, May 24th, 2026. I have to tell you, I am really excited to go through the book of Ruth with you. The book of Ruth is the finest short story in all of ancient literature. It is absolutely exquisite. It is the remarkable narrative of God's grace in the lives of ordinary people and how God judges sin. Today, I want to go behind the scenes of the first 5 verses and give you insights about what God thought about the actions of Elimelech and his 2 sons. With that said, here is Ruth 1:1-5. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judea went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem and Judea. They went to the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was bereft of her 2 sons and her husband. This story is set in the days of the Judges, which were from 1334 BC to 1130 BC. Here we have Elimelech leaving his home in Bethlehem, which, by the way, means house of bread, to sojourn in Moab. Sojourn can also be rendered to dwell temporarily in Moab. This is telling us that Moab was thinking of only living in Moab temporarily. The map to my right shows the route traveled by Elimelech, Naomi, and her 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, from Bethlehem to Moab. It was a journey between 80 to 120 kilometers that on foot would have taken 7 to 10 days through treacherous terrain. We can't be certain because the text does not explicitly state it, but the sense we get is that the famine was an expression of divine judgment. The fact that it was local to Israel, Moab was not far away, is one such indicator. That is, it seems as if the prophet Samuel, who wrote the book, wants his readers to recall the covenant passage found in Leviticus 26, 15 to 16 and 20. If you spurn my statutes, and if your soul abhors my rules, so that you will not do all my commandments, but break my covenant, then I will do this to you. Your strength shall be spent in vain, for your land shall not yield its increase, and the trees of the land shall not yield their fruit. The fact that there is a famine in Bethlehem, but not in Moab, sure does seem like the famine occurred because of God's judgment. When it comes to Elimelech leaving Bethlehem and going to Moab, the book of Ruth does not tell us why Elimelech simply didn't wait out the famine in Bethlehem. But the wonderful thing is that the ancient rabbis did indeed tell us why. On the Jewish website, Torah.org, they point out that there is a disconnect between Elimelech's name, which means my God is king, and what his character was like. The sages point out that any man who believes God is king would never abandon his people at the time of famine, and that there is literally a gap between the man and what he called himself. They also point out that Elimelech said this when famine came upon Bethlehem. Now all of you will come to my doorpost, each one with his begging cup in his hand. Then it says that Elimelech arose and fled from them. From what the ancient rabbis said, Elimelech left because he was greedy and didn't want to share his resources with his neighbors. God is not pleased when his people refuse to use their resources to help others. God wants us to live generously. Living generously is one way which God's people are called to help others. Being generous doesn't mean just sharing your finances. Generosity can look like lots of things, from spending time with a friend who's going through a hard time to donating extra food to a local charity. Then in verse 3 it says, but Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died. In Judy Fentress Williams' book on Ruth, she says, an ancient Near Eastern worldview would consider leaving the homeland the equivalent of death. So Elimelech was dead before he dies in the land of Moab. The ancient rabbis are telling us that God was not pleased with Elimelech taking his family out of Bethlehem. We have no idea how Elimelech died. All we know is Elimelech failed to trust the promises of God. And God's promises belong with Israel in the land of Canaan. Verse 4 and 5 tell us that Elimelech's two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, took Moabite wives, Orpah and Ruth. Then both of them died. When the Israelites entered the promised land, the Lord had told them not to intermarry with the other nations as written in Deuteronomy 7, verses 3 to 4. You must not intermarry with them. Do not let your daughters and sons marry their sons and daughters, for they will lead your children away from me to worship other gods. Then the anger of the Lord will burn against you, and he will quickly destroy you. Elimelech and his two sons are perfect examples of what can happen when we go against God's will and sin. Sinning against God has consequences. In the case of Elimelech, Mahlon and Chilion paid the ultimate price for their sin. Many of you think that you can get away with sinning against God, and you may get away with sinning in your lifetime, but remember what God tells us in Romans 14, verse 12. So then, every one of us shall give account to himself to God. Next week, I will start dwelling on Ruth, and happier days are ahead. May the good Lord be with you until we meet again next week.